Lots to cover, but first, news from the world over. On October 1st, Vatican police raided the Secretariat of State, removing documents and hard drives in an ongoing investigation of financial malfeasance. Days later, a confidential memo announced the suspension of 5 Vatican employees. That was leaked to the media, causing speculation about the extent of the financial corruption at the Holy See. And this week, the sudden resignation of Vatican Police Commander Domenico Gianni has added to the mystery. What is going on at the Vatican Secretariat of State and its Financial Information Authority? Here with a report is the National Catholic Register's Rome correspondent, Edward Pentin. Ed, thanks for being here. I want to start with this resignation of Police Chief Domenico Gianni. He was supposedly resigned over the leak of that Vatican police flyer identifying 5 employees who were suspended as part of this financial investigation. Now, the Vatican said Gianni, quote, bore no responsibility for the leaked flyer. So why did he resign?
Well, this is the question, Raymond, and it's, as usual with these cases, it's full of intrigue and mystery. It's difficult to know exactly why he resigned because, as you say, the reasons didn't really hold up. If he didn't bear any responsibility for it, then why did he have to resign? But it does seem to be connected, at least this is what I've seen, with Cardinal Becciu slightly because of his connections with the old guard and the fact that he knew so much about VatiLeaks. He was here, of course, throughout both VatiLeaks trials and VatiLeaks scandals, and seemed to know a lot about everybody in the Vatican because of that.
Now, you write in your piece that there is speculation that Gianni was on his way out, and some suggest the story gave the perfect cover for dismissing him without disclosing the real reasons why. Why would he have been on his way out? Now, I've read some accounts in other publications talking about the surveillance of cardinals and bishops, and that made a lot of people in the Vatican uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. It goes back to what I was saying about the VatiLeaks connection, because that did give him a lot of information, and that gave him a lot of power, which people resented, it seems to be the case. And so I think they just felt that it was really time, a lot of people felt it was time for him to leave. And I put in my piece also the connection with Libero Maloney, who was the former Auditor General. He was basically framed and pushed out because he was getting too close to financial corruption, and it was Domenico Gianni who was the one who he said it in an interview a couple of years ago that Gianni intimidated him to get him to sign a document saying that he should be arrested, and so in that way he was sort of hounded out. Yeah. So there's this connection between Domenico Gianni, the old guard who are trying to resist the financial reform, and a part of that, at least this is what I've discovered, is as I said earlier, Cardinal Angelo Becciu, who seemed to be teaming up with Domenico Gianni to resist the financial reform. That is how it seems to be, from what I've found out from my sources.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about Cardinal Becciu's role in this, but it seems Gianni was his power, his strength, his enforcer, if you will. I need to get to this, though. This recent raid of the Vatican offices carried out by Gianni is reportedly connected to a $200 million Swiss bank account controlled by the Secretariat of State. And apparently that money was used in 2014 to finance a luxury property development in London. And it's been reported that these investments were authorized by the man you just mentioned, Cardinal Giovanni Becciu, who was from 2011 until 2018 the second-ranking official at the Vatican Secretariat of State. He's currently the head of the Congregation for the Cause of Saints. What are you hearing about this investigation and Cardinal Becciu's role in this investment?
Well, it seems to be, as you said, he was the sostituto then, the Deputy Secretary of State, and he seemed to have borne responsibility for this investment, which lost a lot of money for the Vatican, I understand. But the other question about the sort of financial questions about this is why was Cardinal Becciu involved with this at all? Because all real estate is dealt with by another dicastery. It's called APSA, which deals with all real estate and assets of the Holy See. And so the question is, why was the Secretariat of State dealing with this at all? And that's another murky part of this, which we don't know yet. The answers we don't know, but there seems to be a lot more here to be uncovered. And that may come next week when there's a book coming out by Gianluigi Nuzzi, who's an Italian investigative journalist who apparently has a lot of information on this and other things. And that's coming out next week. So there's speculation that all of this might have been connected with that and the book coming out, book coming out next week.
Now, L'Espresso is reporting that this London complex contained a number of what they call priest apartments where illicit activities were conducted. Any news on that? The Vatican, by the way, is not talking about this at all. They won't comment.
No, I haven't heard anything more about that, but there has been talk over the years about Vatican property being used for illicit means or whatever, not in a grand scale, but to some extent, and that also Gianni has been we don't know if he's involved in that, but there's sort of talk that he might have known it was going on but let it carry on. But that's something we can only speculate about. But it's likely that he did know, because he did seem to know about everything, and was quite strong at enforcing the law when it was asked to be done, and clearly it wasn't in these cases.
Well, this is not the first controversy involving Cardinal Becciu during his time at Secretariat of State. In 2017, he was responsible for the dismissal of the Vatican's first ever Auditor General. You mentioned this a moment ago, Libero Milone. Now, he accused Milone of spying on the finances, the personal finances of senior officials, including Cardinal Becciu. Now, Milone said the facts presented to him on the morning of the dismissal had no credible foundation, and as you mentioned earlier, he said the police chief, Gianni, intimidated him into signing a letter of resignation. In 2016, Cardinal Becciu was instrumental in ending the financial reforms at the Vatican instigated by Cardinal George Pell. What is the through line here? What are people seeing here? That perhaps the viewer, it's very difficult to keep all these figures in line and figure out what's happening.
Well, I did ask Cardinal Becciu last week about this, about also the raid, but I've asked him before about this issue of stopping this audit, and he's obviously, he says, well, it was all above board. He said that they weren't consulted about this big audit in 2017, which he had cancelled unilaterally, because he wasn't informed about how expensive it was going to be. And but I've been told that that's not true. It was cleared by the Council for the Economy. Cardinal Pell signed off on it. Cardinal Marx, who's head of the Council for the Economy, signed off on it. So there's a lot of mystery about why, or questions asked, I should say, about Cardinal Becciu and why he was so keen to stop this audit, and that people feel, well, he's part of this old guard that's resisting financial reform. They don't want certain aspects of the finances in the Vatican to be uncovered, and that seemed quite clear. Both Libero Milone and Cardinal Pell were getting very close to uncovering a lot of the information, a lot of the speculation of corruption, alleged corruption in the Vatican.
And it seems it ties to some of these senior officials, and they moved to stop it. Now, the Pope met with the head of the police, the now retired head of the police force there, Gianni, and his family at the Vatican the other day. What's the story there? Was that kind of a PR move to smooth over things? Because the letter of his resignation was very odd about he's resigning out of love of the Church and the Holy Father. None of that really made sense.
Yes, well, this is speculative, of course, but people have asked questions about this resignation interview, which he gave to Vatican media, which is kind of unusual. I mean, it's quite unusual that someone who's dismissed or resigns does that in the Vatican. And as you say, it could have been a sort of face-saving exercise for Gianni. And then the Pope going to meet him was considered to be questions were raised a bit about that and why the Pope would do that. That's kind of unusual as well. And as I say in my piece, it may be connected with the fact that he does know so much, and they're perhaps a little bit concerned about what he might reveal now that he's not in the Vatican anymore. I mean, I've been following this for quite a while now, and I remember hearing that not only is he considered the most powerful man in the Vatican, but he knows so much that even the Secretariat of State and the Pope are scared of him. So he had a lot of weight he could carry, and I think there may be some concern about that, but we can only speculate.
Yeah, I wish I were a publisher. I'd sign Gianni up right now, send him his advance. A few days after the Vatican raid, Pope Francis assigned anti-mafia prosecutor Giuseppe Pignatone to the Vatican court tasked with getting to the bottom of the Vatican Bank's misuse of funds. What are you hearing about Pignatone, and what are the expectations?
Well, I've only heard good things. That this is probably a good move because he comes from outside the Vatican. He comes with lots of experience. As you say, he's an anti-mafia judge who's had experience of dealing with such corruption. And people do say, well, there is a sort of mafia type sort of corruption that's been going on in the Vatican finances particularly. And so this is seen as a good move, as is actually quite a lot of these developments, that they feel that finally things are starting to move in cleaning up some of this corruption in the Vatican. And so this is just one step in that. And I think I've heard also that part of it is to do, and I've said this before, I think to you, that Archbishop Pentin, who is Cardinal Becciu's successor, has been moving quite well on this and has been given information which he's acted upon, which others hadn't. So it's a positive thing, and I think it probably gives a bit of hope at last in other words, murky world in the Vatican.
Yeah, well, they've got to clean this corruption up because this, as we've said repeatedly, financial corruption usually goes hand in hand with other moral corruptions, and it's important to root it out and get these people out of the offices of power. Certainly, today at the Amazon Synod at the press conference, Ed, you really made some news with a question about donations that you discovered from the pro-abortion Ford Foundation to the organizing committee of this synod, REPAM, which is a conglomerate of bishops in the region, but they are the organizers of the synod. What did you learn there? $2 million donation.
Yes, well, this is information actually found out by a young Brazilian journalist who's here in Rome called Bernardo Custa, who had said actually a while ago that the Ford Foundation has been funding this particular organization called CHIMI. It's a missionary council for indigenous people in Brazil. And they've been giving to the tune of nearly $2 million over 10 years to this group, the Ford Foundation. And this is connected, it's actually run by the bishops, or it's very closely connected to them. And it was founded actually by Bishop Erwin Kreutler, who is who's become quite well known here. He was a key figure in organizing the synod. And is pro-women priest also, and he started this organization, and it's very closely linked to REPAM, which is the group which set up this synod, and is basically running the meeting. So it's a lot of interesting things have been uncovered here by this journalist called Bernardo Custa.
And what do you think would be the motive, before I let you go, of the Ford Foundation donating to what is essentially a church meeting of bishops? What would be their end game?
Well, this is the question, and it doesn't say on the website exactly where the money goes. And what also is interesting is that this organization, CHIMI, doesn't actually give information on its website where the money goes, even though the president told me today that it does. It's all rather murky, and we don't know what the Ford Foundation, what they wanted out of this. Well, I did ask them, I didn't hear back. But we also don't know what the organizations, whatever conditions were placed on them to do this. But what's also interesting about this is that so many of these organizations seem to be connected with the Ford Foundation and other groups too, which have got agendas. And they're all connected too. And so to use a catchphrase of the moment, which we hear a lot in the Synod, everything's connected, but not just in terms of what they're saying at the Synod, but also with these things as well. And there are a lot of these groups which are very interconnected and pushing an agenda.
Yeah. Edward Pentin, thanks for your good reporting. And you can read all of Ed's reporting from this Amazon Synod and beyond at ncregister.com. You can also follow him at Edward Pentin. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Raymond.